Welcome everyone to today's main SUD Learning Community webinar. Today we'll be hearing from Mike Gray on caring for affected others, the secondary impacts of the opioid crisis. My name is Kristen with CCSME and I'll be supporting today's webinar along with my colleague Casey. I have just a couple of quick notes before we begin. First, neither the presenters nor the planners have any relevant financial relationships to disclose. This activity has been planned and implemented in accordance with the accreditation requirements and policies of ACCME through the joint providership of the Hanley Center for Health Leadership and Education and CCSME. The Hanley Center is accredited by the MMA Committee on Continuing Medical Education and Accreditation to provide CME for physicians. The Hanley Center has designated this activity for one AMA PRA Category 1 credit. The opinions expressed by this speaker in this webinar series are their own and do not represent a position of the state of Maine or CCSME. Recording and live stream transmission of this webinar without consent is not permitted. We will have a few minutes at the end of the presentation for questions and answers, so please hold any questions until that time or place them in the chat feature in Zoom. Slides and materials from today's webinar will be sent out in the follow-up email. And now I'd like to give a quick introduction for our speaker today. Mike Gray is a retired Air Force SNCO. After retiring from active duty, Mike focused his education and work experience on serving at-risk youth and other underserved populations as a teacher, peer support worker, case manager, and program manager. He currently oversees the Substance Affected Youth Program for Penquist CAP, where his team finds and supports adolescents and teens who have been impacted by substance use in their homes and communities. And with that, I will hand it off to Mike for our presentation. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks. Thank you everyone for joining us. They're going to bring up the slides here in just a second, or are they up already? And I'm just not seeing them, but basically back in 2022, we started the Substance Affected Youth Program based on a couple of grants from the Office for Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. It's called the Opioid Affected Youth Initiative. We've learned a lot and we've done a lot. We've grown a lot. And the result was we got another grant in 2024 to keep the work and keep expanding. So what I'm going to do today is this is a presentation we give when we go into schools. Our program is basically provides a multi-tier system of support for kids. Tier 1 is just basically this presentation, which is the education piece to help kids understand whether they're affected or not, and if they are, what they've got to do. And then Tier 2 is, we go in, we actually create what we call SAY groups. We partner with the schools, we go in and then we work those groups into their academic day. And we do all kinds of different stuff. We'll talk about that at the end. And then the best sites, we get that Tier 3 level. We're fully integrated with the school administration, and the kids can actually request time to one-on-one time to come sit down and talk with us. We focus on the motivational interviewing styles, oftentimes to help prepare them for a counseling session that they're having later. So it's great work. It's the best job in the world, but it's definitely a little bit unique. So this presentation you're going to see, we created it kind of in the dark. If any of you have done grant management, you know what that's like. You get somebody writes the grant, whether you had any input or not into it, and next thing you know, you get handed the grant and you get to execute it. So the deliverables they're fine. The deliverables are realistic, but the execution was a little bit fuzzy because I don't think anyone had done this kind of work before. Initially, our focus was going into recovery centers and helping the kids while the parents were in their own meetings. Most of the recovery centers aren't exactly kid-friendly, or at least the kids don't feel like they're kid-friendly. So we pivoted real quick and we started focused on going into schools. Initially, we provided in-school support, or basically it was in-school suspension that we renamed it, so it was positive. And what we found was that 70% of the kids in the schools where we were doing the in-school suspension stuff, and we focused on doing restorative approaches, but 70% of the kids that are being referred for disciplinary issues were affected youth. So it begs the question: is it just a strictly behavior issue, or is there actually a trauma response going on? And I don't know what the answers are fully, but there were definitely a lot of trauma responses. We've had great results. So this presentation, we initially developed it on our own, and then over the last 3 years, the kids have really they've changed the presentation. They've told us what works, what doesn't work, and we're actually training kids to give this presentation to other kids. They're not quite ready yet. They don't feel comfortable doing it in front of a professional audience. We can get them to do it in front of kids right now, but they're not ready to do it in front of providers. But hopefully soon they'll be a little more confident and be ready to go. So what you're going to see is the presentation we give to kids, and it's what kids think other kids need to hear, basically. And then, but I'm not going to give you the presentation like I would give it to kids. I'm going to talk about why we do things, the meaning behind some of it, and hopefully that will help you understand what our program does. So next slide, please. So the very first thing we like to do is make sure that we're all using a common language by having these basic definitions of what are substances, what is substance misuse, and what is substance use disorder, right? And we do that for a couple of different reasons. One, to make sure that we all understand what we're talking about going into the conversation. But the other thing is we have to kill stigmatizing language right up front. There are a host of reasons why stigmatizing language perpetuates, but it's not uncommon for a kid who's in a kinship placement or from a home where divorce has occurred and the non-custodial parent has a substance use disorder, and they're getting a lot of negative language thrown at them, and that's what they perpetuate. So if we can nix it right in the front and we focus on the disease and not the not the horrible language that gets thrown around out there, if we hit it right up front, then we're a lot more productive. When we get into using substance use disorder, we really we rely on Cookie Monster a whole bunch, and it seems a little gimmicky, but it's a really nice way for us to be able to discuss all the criteria in the DSM-5 in a way that kids will understand. Our primary audience are middle school kids. We found if we go into high schools, they're kind of too cool for school, and they don't really want to listen to us so much. If we go too young, then these concepts are way beyond their mind. If we're doing anything with the middle school, we rely on things like Timby Talks About Addiction, which is a kid's book that talks about these issues. But the middle schoolers, by and large, are really ready for this. But occasionally you get an immature fifth grade group, and Cookie Monster is a nice way to relate with them. And even up to the really mature eighth graders, they'll still smile at Cookie Monster when you talk about, okay, if Cookie Monster has a whole plate full of cookies and he's only supposed to eat one, and he eats a whole plate, was that substance misuse or substance use disorder? And we talk about patterns of behavior and things like that. So it's just a good pattern. It seems gimmicky, and it probably is a little bit, but it's also a good way just to illustrate with the kids. Next slide. Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. It's populated. There we go. So the reason why we have those pictures up there, when we talk about who is an affected other, that definition at the bottom is kind of something that there are other definitions out there in the world, but this is the one we've kind of honed in on, that is, your pursuit of happiness is interrupted by somebody else's choices around drugs and alcohol. Those of us who work in the profession, we all know somebody, even in our personal lives, there's somebody from every demographic group you can come up with who is affected by this, who is involved with substance misuse. But the real thing, there's a couple things we want to get across. Number one, if you're affected, it doesn't mean you're bad. And there's perceptions out there, and I see it in school administrators sometimes, that that kid never had a chance because of his family. Well, that's really a great positive attitude that will perpetuate. I'm sure that will halt multi-generational substance use disorder right there. The other thing is we have found in many cases, the middle class kid who is getting straight A's and plays 3 sports, the school administrators will decide that kid can't possibly be substance affected. And that is absolutely, not the case at all. We run into kids a lot of times that are where the school will argue with us like that. Well, no, they can't be. Well, they are. Um, we're at the point now where if we go into a partner with the school and the school tells us they're going to decide who's substance affected and send them to us, we don't partner with them. We walk away because it's counterproductive. We know what if that's their mindset going into it, they're going to send us kids that fit all the negative stereotypes you can come up with, and we don't really want to perpetuate that. So we nip it in the bud. Next one. Okay, so everyone on my team does this slide a little bit different, but I like to draw a word picture. I for the kids, I say you're standing beside a nice still pond. Just out a little ways from the shore is a frog floating in the water. A little further out is a turtle on a log. Halfway across the pond is a duck who's swimming around, and on the other side of the pond is somebody else who's fishing. And you take a big old rock and you throw it in the water, and it hits right beside the frog, and the frog goes whoosh up in the air. So who's affected? And of course, all the kids say, well, the frog's affected. And then we'll get little arguments with the kids about whether the turtle on the log got affected. If the water knocked him off the log, he's definitely affected. And the duck, was that affected? And the fishermen, were they affected? And, they eventually they get to the point where, well, if they caught fish, they probably don't think they're affected. But if they didn't catch fish, they're definitely blaming you for throwing the rock, and therefore they are affected. And those are all great discussions to have. And then we get into what was under the water? What did you not see? The tadpoles, the fish, the bugs, the plants. And maybe there was a turtle under there, and the rock landed on the turtle and it's going to pin to the bottom now. So you don't always know who's being affected. And if you're the one causing the situation, you may not realize who your actions are affecting. And from a casual observer on the outside, you may not realize who's being affected. So we just kind of really, we can't decide who is affected and who isn't, but we try to open the doors as much as we can. At some of the national conferences I go to, they like to throw around the phrase that all kids are substance exposed or substance affected. And I'm not sure of the validity of that statement, but I know for us, we just try to open the door and let the kids decide whether they are or they're not. And then we learn more about their story and kind of figure out from there. We also, in our programming, we've also opened up our services to what we call allies. Quite often, allies are a kid who is not sure if they're affected, but they know their friend is, and they want to be able to support their friends. So they want to be involved. They want to learn some things. Quite frequently, what we have is a kid who is still trying to keep the family secret because of stigma. So by allowing them to identify as an ally, they kind of fly under the radar, and they're allowed to access our services without being, without betraying what they feel is a loyalty to their family or their loved one who's dealing with substance use disorder. Next one. And this is where things get a little bit interesting, shall we say. So we like to focus on being an affected other is a huge spectrum, right? So much is thrown around about the negative impacts, and rightfully so. That's what we associate with for the most part. But if we focus only on the negative, we totally negate the hope and pride that someone can feel when a loved one starts down their recovery journey or successfully is in long-term recovery. Everyone on my team is an affected other. It wasn't really designed that way. I think it's just because it's more common than we give it credit for, right? And when we started this program, we really didn't understand the term affected other. And through our research and our readings and two of us sat down one day and we actually started shedding tears like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how much of an impact it had on my life, right? So therefore we decided that we're going to model an appropriate level of vulnerability when we're talking to these kids. It's a really purposeful approach. We're very careful of how much we share, but we all have stories we share. For me, when we talk about the proud and the hopeful, I talk about my best friend currently, who has been in long-term recovery for 8 years, and is now a provider out in the community, doing great work, and how proud I am of what he's done in 8, 9 years now, actually 9 years. And we also talk about like my boundaries with him. If I go out to dinner with him, do I drink a beer, right? Uh, and how important it is to talk with somebody who's in recovery about what kind of support they need from me and those type of things. We also talk about all the things about being sad and worried about not knowing what's going to be going on when you get home and things like that. And we all have stories around that. And then my former best friend, 20 years ago, no, not quite 20 years ago, sneaking up on 20 years, I'm getting old. My former best friend was killed by a drunk driver, a teen who drank alcohol supposedly for the first time and hit his car and killed him. So we talk about at the extreme end, there's the loss of life and how there is no hope at that point, right? The story is complete. All you can do is focus on yourself. Um, we get a little bit of grief sometimes from people about this approach, about modeling that level of vulnerability. But I know it's extremely effective, and we, like I said, we have to be very careful what we do share. We don't want to re-traumatize or trigger anybody, so we're very purposeful in our language. But as we're going through and we're modeling that behavior, it is not uncommon for a kid to just point at themselves in the middle of that discussion. So you're in a group of 50 kids, and you've got a kid just pointing like and nodding like me too. And that's when you know that you're really okay. They get it. And now I've connected with at least one kid in this group. And uh, so I guess for those of you who work in the prevention field, there is something called a credible messenger, and that's what we're trying to be. But we're trying to be a credible messenger for affected others. So if that sums it up. Next slide. So we use a couple different curriculum in our work in the groups. But in this presentation, we start off, this is from the Children's Programming Kit from SAMHSA, the 7 C's. You're probably all familiar with it. And we just run through them in this presentation so that, again, this is a tier 1 level approach. We want to make sure that everybody gets a touch of it, but we don't go deep diving in here. But if we establish a group with the school, then we take 7 weeks to go through the 7 C's, and we go through each and every one of them. I didn't cause it as a real common one. Next slide. I can't cure it. The number one question we get from kids is, how do I get, and insert relative here, how do I get my relative, the person I love, who is struggling with substances, into recovery? And of course, we all know the answer to that. There is no magic pill. But there's a tremendous amount of anxiety among kids who know that the behavior is unhealthy and they want to stop it. But if they invest their time and energy into it, it's not going to be productive. So next slide. Can't control it. This one is always fun when you're talking with kids. Kids, what's that old show? Kids say the darndest thing. Well, kids do the darndest thing to try to control a loved one's substance misuse. It is the amount of times I hear about kids throwing their loved one's alcohol in a lake, or pouring it down the drain, or flushing drugs down the toilet. We all know that's not productive. But the kids, this is them trying to. We all know somebody with a trauma history needs to be empowered. This is them trying to take power. It's just not healthy for them. So next slide. So then we focus on the next 4 C's, the ones that things that they can do. We like this slide because everyone's flown an airplane, or most kids have flown an airplane, and if not, we can give the flight attendant speech about how you need to put your own oxygen mask on before you help anybody else, because then you won't be able to. If you don't, you won't be able to help anybody else because you'll be unconscious. It's an easy concept for kids to wrap their head around. Is if you have a loved one who's struggling with substances and they need to enter into recovery, the number one thing you need to do is make yourself healthy first. And if you're healthy, then you'll have the energy and the skills in order to help support the recovery when they enter into it. So next. Communicate your feelings. This one is a lot of fun when you're working with kids. They don't always have the best vocabulary to express themselves. So we spend a lot of time actually trying to teach them things, and we have some exercises we do, and we do some we do a little bit of word journaling at times because they can express their feelings with pictures better than they can with their words. But um, there's several. If for those of you who aren't familiar, there's something out there called BEST, Be Each Other Support Team, that very much focuses on that word journaling stuff. It's actually used in some prison systems for adults who don't actually have the vocabulary to express themselves either, but they're, it's a way for them to get their feelings out. And we use that with kids. And we talk about things like establishing boundaries. Um, you know, I think a lot of adults need to get better at that, but if we can start helping them when they're kids, then they're going to be even better off. Next. So, forgive me, my dog has decided she wanted to visit. So there's more on that slide that should be coming up, but there we go. So when we talk about making healthy choices, again, everybody in the team kind of takes a different approach. I will say, Joe, for those of you who met Joe either at the Governor's Opioid Summit or at the event down in Phippsburg, Joe is a unique character. He's incredibly professional, but he comes across as the biggest aloof goofball in the world. And one of the things that he does that I just find so fascinating is he joined the chorus for one of the schools we partnered with. So here's a 40-year-old man with tattoos and a beard who is singing alongside seventh graders and has actually participated in a couple of concerts. And he did that because he said, there's kids that need to be involved in these things, and they're not doing it because they don't have somebody who's making themselves vulnerable. He's not a great singer. I'll tell you that right up front. He'll tell you that right up front. But he gets out there and sings his heart out with these kids. And the chorus has thrived because of his participation. So we try to do that with some of our kids. We're trying to model these things where you make the good choices. All of those things. This slide used to be, you've probably all seen it in a matrix with brain chemistry and all those things where you can pet puppies and all that stuff. The kids, they just want to hear what events, what activities can help build up their brain chemistry and make them better. And, being with friends and playing sports and going out in nature and doing all those things. So like in this summer, we are focused, since we're not in schools right now, we create opportunities for these kids to do those things. We're taking kids fishing. We're going to museums. We've toured Bangor International Airport. We've toured the Bangor Waterfront Concert Pavilion behind the scenes where, the kids are just fascinated by where Jelly Roll got to sit before he went on stage. They love those things, but they get them out. They're talking with each other. So we create those opportunities for them to make those healthy choices and get that brain chemistry where it should be. So that's a fun part of what we do. And next slide. And then, of course, celebrate yourself. This is my personal favorite. Okay, so you can picture these kids. They choose to join the SAY group because they've identified as being an affected other. We put them through, 7 weeks of these hour-long sessions where we're talking about these 7 C's. That's how we, when we start the groups, the very first thing we do is we talk about what our group agreement is going to be, what are our norms, what are our rules, and we can't do anonymous in the school setting, but we really rely on things like, and the kids come up with this on their own. If they didn't, we'd have to push it. But what is said here stays here, and all of those tenets of the 12-step programs and things like that. Very much about not one-upping each other. You don't have to have a better story than somebody else. Your story is your story. It's okay, whatever it may be. But it's fascinating that we've partnered with 8 schools at this point, and we've got more schools than that on the waiting list. But at all 8 schools where we've established SAY groups, these kids all seem to come up with almost identical agreements on their own. So we don't have to come in and mandate anything. They come up with it. So, we do that agreement. Then we'll do like an art project. We ask the kids to bring in a poem or a piece of music or something that says that they'll explain why they feel like they should be part of the group. And that is always gut-wrenching. Sometimes it's, pop music, TikTok videos. We do this thing called real time. So if you're on Facebook, whatever, you see the reels. The kids will bring in a reel that's meaningful to them. But like one time we had a kid whose parent had passed away from a substance related death, and the kid brought in the video from YouTube of his dad singing the song about how he wished he could be a better father. And you know, Joe and I are both dads. We were totally wrecked at the end of that because here's this kid just pouring his heart out to the group, and I think everybody walked out of there like, wow. So we have to build in time at the end of our group meetings in order to be able to pivot if we have something really heavy that really sticks with the kids, so that we end on a some kind of a more uplifting, positive note. I rely on activities. I have a whole bag of games that I drag around with me. I tell the kids, you give me 40 minutes and I'll give you 20 minutes of fun. You give me 40 minutes of your attention, and then we'll end on something just, sometimes it's chaotic. But anyways, when we get to the 7th C here and we do celebrate, it's actually bankrupt to me at this point, but we always do food. We always do some kind of ice cream party or whatever. And then throughout the year, we focus on celebrating little things. We've had kids who have been misusing cannabis for years who decide to quit, and they're part of our group. And when they want to announce it to everybody else they quit, we're going to celebrate that. We're going to have a party of some sort, and they get to decide what it's going to be. We had a kid who had lost one parent to incarceration, another parent to a substance related death, and another relative had gone through the paperwork and had finally been allowed to adopt them. Of course, we celebrated that. I mean, that was not just a say group celebration. It started that, and it became an entire school celebration. The entire school came down and got ice cream to celebrate with that kid. Those important moments, they're powerful things. They're powerful to witness. Next slide. So we tell all the kids that they are, if you're infected, you get to decide what that looks like for you. So as said in my intro, I'm a retired Air Force senior non-commissioned officer. I did 7 combat deployments, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, some places in Africa you've never heard of. I've been everywhere. And I got a lot of medals over my time. If you know medals, the top closest to the center is supposed to be the most important one. For me, there's one way down in the middle, not very exciting looking, that is actually the one that's most meaningful to me, because it was from a time where we were in a miserable place doing a miserable job. It was muddy, it was cold, people were shooting at us, but we just had a great group of people, and the attitude was so positive the whole way through that when you left, you felt like you were leaving your family, right? So we use that to illustrate to the kids. You get to decide who sees the medal. You get to decide how important it is. But the important thing is that you recognize that other people have it too. And when you see them wearing it or identifying with it, you get to say, hey, we were there together. We have the same sort of stories. So in this manner, we unite kids who have a shared experience, shared lived experiences, and they're defeating stigma on their own. This past spring, Joe was nominated and voted to be the speaker for this graduating 8th grade class. And the 2 kids who were also speakers for this graduating 8th grade class were also part of our SAY group in that school. Joe didn't talk about it other than to say what our program does and how honored he is to work with these kids and how much he's learned from them. But these kids get up there and talked about their experiences of being an affected other and how they feel like at this school they're not alone anymore. Surveys we do, a lot of informal. Sometimes I ask them to write, because I do a lot of grant packages, because we're constantly trying to find more money for this. But I ask the kids, hey, if I'm putting a grant package together, what do you want somebody to hear about this? And they'll sit down and they'll write a letter to whatever person is on the board for this grant we're chasing. And the amount of times that the kids say, I'm not even friends in this with the kids in this group, but I feel like I can talk about anything with them. Or um, kids say that just a lot of stuff on the same vein. I can share. I save it all anonymously so I can use it and stuff. But it's just incredible that once they realize they're not the only one. Our very first group that we stood up, we had 9 kids in the group, um, and 6 of them, we knew one kid had lost their mother to a substance related death, but there were 5 others. So 6 out of 9 had lost a parent to a substance related death in that little group. And that floored us. But what was really powerful was that none of those 6 kids knew that anyone else had been through that same experience until that meeting. And almost at that point, we could almost like, look, we're done. We did our work. They now have this natural support system. And those 6 kids really were the core of that school for the longest time. They really leaned on each other a lot because they were just hiding something they shouldn't have been ashamed about. So it was very powerful for them to be connected that way. Next. So our say groups, I've already touched on shared experiences. We're really big on the kids taking the lead. I talked about them coming up with their own group agreements and those sort of things. But if you've worked in case management or any provider function for a while, you know how easy it is to start deciding what's best for the client, right? But the true moment when you know you're being successful is when the client starts doing things on their own to advocate for themselves, starts making choices, and you're like, okay, this individual is now uh, becoming empowered to take control of their own life. So we're very mindful to step back and let the kids take the lead when they're ready to do so, and we seek out those opportunities. And when we're deciding what needs to be done, sometimes we have to remind ourselves that we're not in charge, and we have to invite the kids up, or we ask them what they want to do. We're also big on those community impact projects. I love the story of our second group that we established. It was a group of 8th grade girls who were absolute terrorists at this school. They prided themselves on making teachers cry and quit. I mean, that was just horrible, right? So that was our second group, and it was a chaotic year of getting them kind of organized and settled down. But by the end of that school year, there was a real shift in their attitude, and some of it's from the school, and some of it was from us. But it was a real team, multidiscipline approach to working with these kids. And when we were coming up with what we're going to do for the summer, those girls looked at us and said, "You know what? We wish somebody was doing this work for us when we were littler, when we were in elementary school. So could we put on work, arts and craft projects for kids in the park all summer long, one day a week?" And absolutely, girls. So we facilitated, we bought the supplies, we helped them develop a schedule, but then we would show up and supervise, make sure everybody was safe, but let those 8th grade girls do the work for the elementary age kids. And that was probably our best summer programming ever. It was incredible. We had like 200 kids that summer come through we advertised to all the providers, agencies in the area. This is for affected youth, and those girls facilitated. It was amazing, and they're still leaders now. They're juniors in high school. They're still the core of the group in that high school. The high school didn't want us in there, but when we brought in a pack of girls that were already united and our pretty powerful personalities insisted that the high school was going to let us in, it happened. And now we have like 3 groups running at that high school because of them. And then of course the allies are always welcome because, like I said, sometimes it truly is a kid who just has a big heart and wants to understand what's going on in their community and wants to help. And quite often it's somebody who is trying to keep that family secret. They don't want to out the person they love for having a substance use disorder. And of course we honor that. We're not gonna out anybody. We really rely on, right from the get-go, the kids understanding of what we're not. We're not social workers. We're not cops. I used to be a cop. I'm not anymore. Make that clear. We're not teachers. I used to be a teacher. I'm not a teacher anymore. But all of those positions of power, we give them a lot more latitude than those people in those positions are allowed to give, right? If a kid has had a really horrible weekend, something happened at home, and they drop the F bomb with me, I'm not turning them into the administration. I'm not even yelling at them. We have a conversation about time and place, right? If you need to cuss, you can cuss, but you're going to do it with me, kind of off to the side, away from everybody else. We don't. Um, we kind of dress like bums. Uh, Joe was big on flip flops, jeans, and a t-shirt. Uh, I'm always in shorts and let my tattoos fly. And it's just reducing as many barriers to kids as we can. We don't do anything artificial. It's all authentic of who we are. Like if you see me outside of school, I'm probably going to be in shorts and a t-shirt, but uh, um, I do. I spent many years wearing a suit. I'm comfortable doing that, but the kids don't want to approach me if I'm wearing a suit. That's all there is. And I learned that from working homeless encampments in my previous life. It was, if I showed up in a suit, well, actually, it was somebody from the state who would show up in the suit, and I was showing up in shorts, and they would approach me, they wouldn't approach him. So we've had right now, I think we've got about 8 school partners. I've got more schools than that in the waiting list, but we just don't have enough people on the team. We've got 275 kids in supportive groups in those 8 schools. And one school, we have 50% of the school population as part of our program, which is incredible to me, but it is a very heavily impacted school. Um, uh, we've done this presentation to kids 112 times, so 3,600 kids have heard this presentation. So you guys aren't getting the best effect. We get, when we give it in the schools, we're a little bit animated. We have a lot of fun with the kids, and 371 kids have received that CPK 7Cs curriculum about how kids are naturally resilient. It's just meant to help bring out that natural resilience. And over 900 kids have attended our drop-in events where we do, like I said, field trips, art and crafts, games in the parks. We're in 3 different towns this summer: uh, Lincoln, Old Town, and Corinth. And this week was tie-dye t-shirt week, so we did so many tie-dye t-shirts that I'm surprised my fingers aren't stained purple still. But it's a lot of fun, and I think we're making a difference. If nothing else, we're shifting some of the discussions that are happening in these communities. Because we're a small team, we can't be everywhere all the times. But like the Recovery Wellness Community Center up in Sangerville, right before they activated, they asked us to come up and talk to their community. And we really just did not have the time on our schedule to open another site up there. Um, but we went up and we gave the presentation. We talked about it. We talked about our model. We talked about what we do. And they, on their own, created their own substance affected youth program. And they have a youth advisory board that actually decides what the kids need. And they've got a bunch of high school girls that work with the elementary age kids. And then we go up one day a week to work with those high school girls to make sure they're getting the support they need so they can then pass it down to elementary age kids. It's been really fun to watch them grow as not. I think they're growing. They're almost going to be growing into providers. Almost every one of those girls wants to do this sort of work when they grow up. At this point, it's incredible to watch. And then we have other communities where we do the same thing. We go and we talk and we help them create their own programming. Every school we're in looks different, and therefore every community that wants to have something like this is probably going to be a little bit different. But as long as they're attentive to what the kids need and what the community needs, they can create the same model. And it doesn't take rocket science. It really is, use good curriculum. You be purposeful in your approach, and make sure you do everything you can to protect the kids. So that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. If folks have questions, feel free to either put those in the chat, or you can find the raise hand under the reactions in Zoom, and we can have folks unmute and talk to Mike directly. I am disappointed that you're not wearing a tie-dyed shirt. to show off. But maybe next time we'll get
all
the full
all of the
tie-dye shirt
tie-dye shirts went home
experience.
with kids. They did one for me on Wednesday, but then one of the kids took it and was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. I see a hand from Holly. Go ahead, Holly.
Hi, thank you, Mike. So I'm wondering if there is a middle school kid who would benefit from this and it's not happening in their school district, how might they get involved with something like this?
You see, and it's really tough because it's going to be incumbent upon that community and that school in order to create an opportunity for them. Like,
Okay,
like we could, any kid is welcome to join us in our summer activities if they're up in this region, right? They can come up
okay,
for field trips, and sometimes, we do have those events where these kids show up that we don't really know, but these kids are incredible. If they know a kid has that shared experience, the amount of grace they give to each other is just incredible, and how welcoming it is. Matter of fact, at one of our field trips the other day, we had, geez, we had kids from like 6, 7 different schools show up at this thing, and they'd never met each other before. And I remember at one point, because I get confused about who's who, 275 kids, and they quite honestly all look the same to me at this point. Um, Two kids are like just best buddies, and I'm like, hey, and I realized they're from different schools. I'm like, hey, how'd you guys know each other? Oh, we never met till today, and it's just incredible that they create those opportunities. So yeah, if they're up in this area, you know, reach out to me and I'll share our calendar. I know on Monday we're going to Coles Land Transportation Museum, and I haven't really looked beyond that for the week, um, but
okay,
just that's a single contact might be a good start. And then
okay.
if any school is ever interested in doing something, or any community, we will absolutely um, come talk to them about what we do. And anyone can create this. It's not rocket science, but we have learned so much in 3 years. We really had a vision of what it was going to be like, um, and it's not that anymore because the kids told us that's not what they wanted. So
Yeah. As an LADC, I work with the parents, sometimes the parents who are dying, and oftentimes our relationship goes on for years. So I get to know the kids, and
yeah,
and then sometimes it's just the kids that are left, and it's
I'm
hard to,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I really think there is room in the recovery community to have programs like this located at the recovery centers. But what
definitely.
what has to happen, I think, is like the RWCC, before they were open, they made the dedication they wanted to have kid and family programming, and so they were able to bring it in before the culture of that particular center was codified, so to speak. Whereas the barn, excuse me, the barn in Bangor, or Brewer actually, they're phenomenal. I love the barn. We work very closely with them on several projects, but we were never able to get kid programming up and running there because the kids never felt welcome. The culture of the barn is very much about those meetings, and there was really not a sufficient. At least they didn't feel that there was sufficient space carved out for them. They're very conscientious about trying to change some of that, and that's awesome. But I think it's hard when you've been in existence for a long time, to back that train up on the tracks a little bit. So if anyone's starting one up in the community, think about things like this going into it, and try to build them into the programming. Any other
Thanks,
questions?
Mike. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for
Yeah.
integrating youth and not just programs for affected youth, but
Yeah.
any
And
affected others in a lot of our recovery spaces, I think too.
if
Uh,
anyone's worked with the kids from the MeRap, the youth advisory group, I mean, they're outstanding too. They've come out to some of our summer events, and some of our kids have gone over and joined them, and vice versa. It's uh, the kids, the more room we create for them to have a voice in this, I think the more powerful it becomes. So,
any questions from anyone else? And I will also, as folks are thinking of any possible questions, I'll let folks know the link to the evaluation and the evaluation that you will take in order to access your certificate is there in the chat for folks who would like. Yeah, I think if there are other questions, we can pause here for a moment.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
see
it's
any
really,
questions.
I just want to, before we sign off, the growth of the program that, that you have described is incredible, and to be connecting with so many youth, I think that is, in this line of work, when we're thinking about stigma and changing communities and having youth who are affected by this have spaces that they can talk openly about it, I think is a huge
Well, and
way to start breaking down some of those stigmas. So
my hat's
congratulations
off to
on.
the schools that are willing to partner with us, especially in some of the communities where the attitude towards substance use disorder is very archaic. To be kind, I mean, I don't know how many of you work up in Piscataqua, but some of the attitudes up there are not conducive to this work. Um, we have one school where right in the beginning they were like, "That's great that you're here, but can you not use the words drugs, alcohol, or substances?" Well, what the hell am I supposed to say, right? Um, but to that school's credit, this past year they kind of pulled back and like, we have a problem. We really need you to go full out. I'm like, okay, you asked for it. And when I did this presentation to a group of like 100, we did 100 at a time at the school. And after the first presentation, because I introduced myself when I give this presentation is, my name's Mike, I'm an affected other, and you'll know what that means in a little bit, right? And at the end of the presentation, the principal got up and said, "Hi, I'm an affected other," and he parroted that stuff. And that it was such a powerful moment to see in that community that the attitudes were changing, right? And then the school that's one of them where I've got almost 50% of the population is attending, and it takes the adults in that community to lead. I can come in and teach, but it takes really the ones who are with them every day in order to shift the attitudes. So hats off to those folks who are willing to be courageous.
Yeah, it's really hopeful to hear messages like that.
Uh, Mike, uh, excuse me, you may have said, oh God, I can't talk. You may have said this, but how do we get in touch with you? If we,
cmgray@penquist.org. cmgray@penquist.org. Best way to get hold of me. I'd give you my phone number, but I rarely answer the thing. I'm more an email person because we're on the road so much. So,
okay, appreciate it. I work in
yep.
the Lewiston School District. I'm at the high school, but I am sure this would be an awesome program.
Yeah, and
For the
we're
area.
more than happy to come down. Even like I said, the presentation is tier one, and we'll do that for any district that wants to come in. But there needs to be the follow up activity of the once the message is delivered and kids are comfortable to say that I'm an affected other, and
Mhm.
maybe I could benefit from some. There needs to be a program in place to scoop those kids up and start
Right.
teaching them those things. So
Yeah.
to me, it does. It's somewhat helpful to have the conversation, but if there's no support on the outgoing end of it, then it was kind of a waste.
Absolutely right. Yeah, makes sense.
Great. Well, thank you again, Mike.
Yep.
Lots of nice comments there in the chat as well. Folks appreciating what you shared with us today. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up a few minutes early, unless there are any last questions or any last thoughts that you wanted to share, Mike.
I'm good. If you let me talk, I'll talk all day. So I love the work. And I love our kids. So
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us on your Friday afternoon, and have a good